The convoy carrying William home moved through London's afternoon traffic with the same precision that had marked his departure months earlier. But the atmosphere inside the vehicles was entirely different. Where departure had carried weight and solemnity, return brought anticipation and joy. William sat forward in his seat, watching familiar landmarks pass by the windows, each one bringing him closer to the reunion he had dreamed about through countless lonely nights. Catherine stood at the same entrance to Kensington Palace where they had said goodbye, but everything had changed. The woman waiting for William's return was stronger, more confident and more independent than the one who had watched him leave. She had proven to herself and to the world that she could carry royal responsibilities alone. But now she was eager to once again share that burden with her partner and best friend. The children waited inside the palace, their excitement barely contained despite repeated instructions to remember their manners when Papa arrived. George practiced standing straight and tall, preparing to greet his father with the dignity he thought appropriate for a future king. Charlotte bounced on her toes, clutching the scrapbook she had made of family memories during William's absence. Louis, now taller and more articulate than when his father had left, kept asking if Papa was here yet, his small voice echoing through the corridors. The sound of vehicles in the courtyard sent ripples of anticipation through the palace staff. Those who could reasonably be in the area found excuses to be nearby, wanting to witness the reunion that would mark the end of a chapter that had touched everyone who worked in the royal household. The separation had been a test not just for William and Catherine, but for the entire team that supported their work and their family life. William stepped out of the car with the same fluid motion he had used when leaving, but his face was transformed by a smile that radiated pure happiness. The uniform that had marked his departure for duty was replaced by civilian clothes that spoke of his return to being a husband and father first, prince second. His eyes immediately found Catherine, and the connection between them was so strong it seemed to bridge the physical distance that still separated them. Catherine moved toward William with the grace that had become her signature, but there was nothing practiced or performed about the joy on her face. This was not the composed princess meeting a returning royal. This was a wife running to embrace her husband after months of separation. The months of maintaining dignity in his absence fell away as pure emotion took over, revealing the woman behind the title. Their embrace was everything their goodbye had been forced to contain. Months of careful composure dissolved as they held each other in the palace courtyard, neither caring that staff members and security personnel were witnessing their private joy. William lifted Catherine off her feet, spinning her around with the exuberance of someone who had been denied this simple pleasure for far too long. Her laughter rang out across the courtyard, a sound that had been missing from the palace during his absence. The children's arrival in the courtyard created a scene of pure family joy that would be remembered by everyone present for the rest of their lives. George ran toward his father with the careful dignity of a young prince, but dissolved into giggles when William caught him up in a bear hug that lifted him into the air. Charlotte launched herself at her father with the complete abandon of someone who had missed him desperately, her scrapbook forgotten as she clung to his neck. Little Louis, who had grown so much during William's absence, approached with the shyness of someone meeting a beloved but half-remembered figure. William knelt to Louis's eye level, speaking softly until the little boy's face broke into a smile of recognition and delight. The sight of his youngest son remembering and accepting him brought tears to William's eyes that he made no effort to hide. The family stood together in the courtyard, arms wrapped around each other in a tangle of embraces that seemed to make up for months of separation in a few precious moments. Palace staff who had maintained professional composure throughout the separation found themselves wiping away tears at the sight of the reunion they had all hoped and worked for. This was why their service mattered, moments like this, when duty and sacrifice led to joy and reunion. Catherine and William walked into the palace surrounded by their children, their steps synchronized in a way that spoke of partnership restored. The hallways that had felt too quiet during William's absence now rang with the sounds of complete family life, children's laughter, parents' voices, and the comfortable noise of people who belonged together sharing space again. The first private moments William and Catherine shared, after the children had been settled with their nannies for baths and early dinner, took place in their sitting room where so many important conversations had occurred. They sat close together on the sofa where they had planned the farewell that had started their separation. now planning the adjustments that would mark their reunion. Both had changed during the separation, and they needed time to rediscover each other. William spoke about the lessons his extended mission had taught him about leadership and service, while Catherine shared the confidence she had gained from successfully managing major responsibilities alone. They had both grown during their separation, and now they had the joy of combining their individual development with their renewed partnership. The separation had strengthened rather than weakened their relationship. The children's bedtime that evening was a celebration of family reunification. William read stories he had missed telling, heard about adventures that had happened in his absence, and marveled at how much his children had grown and matured. Each child needed private time with their father, reassurance that he was really home, and would be there when they woke up in the morning. Catherine watched William with their children, noting the ways he had changed during their separation, while delighting in the ways he remained exactly the same. His dedication to duty had deepened, but his love for his family had strengthened in response to the separation. The man who had returned to her was both familiar and newly attractive, tested by service and proven by sacrifice. The public response to news of William's return was overwhelmingly positive, with people around the world celebrating the end of a separation that had touched hearts and inspired admiration. The royal couple's handling of duty-imposed separation had become a symbol of commitment and strength, showing that love could endure any challenge when it was built on solid foundations of respect and partnership. As their first night together in months began, William and Catherine found themselves talking long into the evening, catching up on thoughts and feelings that could never be fully shared through phone calls and written messages. The intimacy of physical presence allowed for conversations that bridged not just the months of separation but also prepared them for whatever challenges the future might bring. The goodbye that had stirred the nation had become a return that inspired it. William and Catherine's separation and reunion had shown people that love could survive any test, that duty shared between committed partners was not a burden, but a privilege, and that some farewells were made precious by the joy of homecoming. Their story had touched hearts around the world, proving that even in an age of instant communication, the simple human experience of missing someone and welcoming them home remained one of life's most powerful truths. The nation that had been moved by their farewell now celebrated their reunion, understanding that they had witnessed something rare and beautiful, a love story that was also a story of service, a royal duty that was also a deeply human experience. William and Catherine had given their people a reminder that behind the titles and ceremonies were real people with real emotions, capable of sacrifice and worthy of celebration when they found their way back to each other. The extended separation had transformed both William and Catherine in ways neither had anticipated. Catherine's solo international engagement had been a resounding success, earning praise from foreign dignitaries and demonstrating her evolution from supporting player to leading lady in the royal family's mission. She returned to London with newfound confidence and a deeper understanding of her own capabilities as a representative of the crown. William watched coverage of Catherine's international triumph from thousands of miles away, his pride overwhelming any lingering concerns about the time they were spending apart. The woman he had married had always been extraordinary, but their separation had allowed her unique qualities to shine in ways that might never have emerged if she had remained in his shadow. He found himself falling in love with her all over again, seeing her through the eyes of the people whose lives she had touched during her solo mission. The children had grown visibly during their father's extended absence, their development marked not just by physical changes, but by increased maturity and resilience. George had become protective of his mother in touching ways, often asking if she needed help or comfort. Charlotte had channeled her missing papa into creative projects, filling notebook after notebook with drawings and letters that she planned to give him upon his return. Louis had learned to blow kisses at photographs of William, understanding that papa was far away but still part of their daily lives. The palace staff had also adapted to the extended separation, developing new routines that supported Catherine's increased responsibilities while maintaining the stability that the children needed. Senior advisors marveled at Catherine's growing confidence in making decisions that would have previously been shared with William, while still respecting the partnership that formed the foundation of their approach to royal duty. Public interest in the royal separation had evolved from initial sympathy to genuine admiration for both partners. Catherine's solo success had earned her recognition as a formidable royal in her own right, while William's dedication to his extended mission demonstrated the depth of his commitment to service. Opinion polls showed the highest approval ratings for the royal family in decades, with many people citing the couple's sacrifice and dedication as reasons for their support. The turning point came when William received word that his mission was nearing completion ahead of schedule. The successful conclusion of his work meant that he could return to his family sooner than expected, news that sent waves of excitement through Kensington Palace. Catherine received the call while reviewing guest lists for an upcoming charity gala, and her reaction was so immediate and joyful that her private secretary later said it was like watching the sun come out from behind clouds. Planning for William's return became a carefully orchestrated operation involving security teams, palace staff, and family schedules. Unlike his departure, which had been planned months in advance, his return needed to be arranged quickly while maintaining the privacy that the family deserved for their reunion. Catherine threw herself into the planning with the same attention to detail she brought to official engagements, wanting everything to be perfect for William's homecoming. The children's excitement about Papa's return was infectious, filling the palace with an energy that had been missing during the long months of separation. George appointed himself as the official greeter, practicing the speech he planned to give when William walked through the door. Charlotte worked frantically to finish a scrapbook of everything that had happened while Papa was away. Louis, though not fully understanding the timeline, seemed to sense that something wonderful was about to happen. Catherine found herself experiencing a mixture of excitement and nervousness that reminded her of the early days of their relationship. So much had changed during William's absence, both in her own development and in the children's growth, that she wondered if they would still fit together as seamlessly as they had before. The woman William would find upon his return was stronger and more independent than the one he had left behind. William faced similar concerns as his departure date approached. The man returning to his family had been tested and strengthened by his experiences, but he worried about how his changed perspective might affect his relationships with Catherine and the children. The separation had taught him valuable lessons about leadership and service, but it had also shown him how much his happiness depended on the people waiting for him at home. The media caught wind of William's early return, leading to speculation about when and where the reunion would take place. Palace officials worked diligently to protect the family's privacy, while acknowledging public interest in the story that had captivated people around the world. The balance between transparency and discretion required careful navigation to ensure the family could reunite without unwanted intrusion. Catherine's final solo engagement before William's return was a visit to a military base where she spoke with families experiencing their own separations. Her words carried the weight of personal experience, and the authenticity of her empathy moved many listeners to tears. She spoke about the strength required to maintain hope across distance and time, drawing on the lessons she had learned during her own months of waiting. The night before William's return, Catherine stood in their bedroom looking at the items he had left behind, books marked with his place, clothes hanging in the wardrobe exactly as he had left them. Tomorrow, these static reminders of his presence would be replaced by the man himself, and their house would once again become a home filled with his laughter and energy. William spent his final night away from home thinking about all the moments he had missed, bedtime stories he hadn't read, conversations he hadn't shared, kisses goodnight he hadn't given. The weight of those missed moments felt heavy, but they also sharpened his appreciation for what he would soon regain. Every sacrifice had led to this moment of anticipation. Every day apart had made their reunion more precious. The security arrangements for William's return were finalized in the early hours of the morning, with teams coordinating to ensure his journey home would be smooth and private. Palace staff prepared the residence for his arrival, making sure every detail was perfect for the family's reunion. Fresh flowers were arranged in the rooms William loved most, and his favorite meals were planned for his first days back. Catherine woke before dawn on the day of William's return, her internal clock apparently aware that something significant was about to happen. She moved through her morning routine with unusual care, choosing her clothes with the same attention she once gave to preparing for their first dates. Today wasn't just about welcoming home a husband. It was about beginning the next chapter of their partnership. As the hours passed and William's arrival time approached, the anticipation in Kensington Palace became almost tangible. Staff members found excuses to pass through the entrance hall, wanting to be present for the reunion they had all been waiting to witness. Catherine checked and rechecked the arrangements, her nervous energy evident to anyone who knew her well. After months of managing alone, she was about to become part of a team again, and the prospect filled her with joy tinged by the natural anxiety that accompanies any significant reunion. Days turned into weeks, and both William and Catherine had settled into the challenging rhythm of separation that duty demanded. The initial sharp pain of goodbye had evolved into a steadier ache of missing each other, but both had found ways to channel their emotions into productive work. Their phone calls had become the anchors of each day, scheduled moments when they could drop their public masks and simply be husband and wife again. Catherine's public engagements during this period became legendary for their warmth and authenticity. Without William beside her, she seemed to shine even brighter, her natural compassion and grace drawing people to her in ways that surprised even longtime royal watchers. At a veterans' charity event, she spent extra time with families whose loved ones were also serving far from home, understanding their struggles in a deeply personal way. The children had adapted to their father's absence with the resilience that children often showed, but they missed him deeply. George had taken on the role of man of the house with touching seriousness, helping his mother with small tasks and being extra protective of his younger siblings. Charlotte peppered Catherine with questions about when Papa would call, while little Louis carried around a photograph of William that he kissed goodnight each evening. William's work in his temporary assignment was going exceptionally well, his focus sharpened by the knowledge that every day he spent away from his family had to count toward something meaningful. His dedication impressed local officials and international observers alike, but those closest to him could see the effort it took to maintain his usual excellence while carrying the weight of separation. The media coverage of the royal separation had evolved from initial shock and sympathy to genuine admiration for how both William and Catherine were handling their duties. Editorial writers praised their commitment to service even in the face of personal sacrifice, and public opinion polls showed unprecedented support for the royal family. The couple's goodbye had indeed stirred the nation, but in ways that strengthened, rather than weakened the public's connection to the monarchy. Catherine's private moments revealed the true cost of maintaining such composure in public. Her ladies-in-waiting reported finding her sometimes standing at windows that faced in William's direction, as if she could somehow see across the miles that separated them. She had developed a habit of touching her wedding ring during difficult moments, drawing strength from the symbol of their commitment to each other. The breakthrough moment came during one of their evening phone calls, when communication problems made their connection unclear and difficult. Instead of becoming frustrated, both William and Catherine found themselves laughing at the absurdity of trying to have an intimate conversation while shouting over static and delay. The laughter reminded them both of their fundamental happiness together and renewed their determination to make the separation bearable. William had received word that his assignment might be extended beyond the original time frame, news that hit him like a physical blow. The additional weeks away from Catherine and the children felt almost unbearable, yet he knew that refusing the extension would compromise important work that only he could complete. The decision of whether to accept or decline the extension became the most difficult choice of his royal career. Catherine sensed something was troubling William during their calls, even though he tried to hide his concern about the potential extension. Her intuition, sharpened by years of marriage and partnership, picked up on subtle changes in his voice and manner. When she finally confronted him about it, his admission about the possible extension brought tears to both their eyes, even as they maintained the composure that had carried them through the original separation. The children's reactions to news of the potential extension varied according to their personalities and understanding. George, old enough to grasp the significance, became quiet and withdrawn for several days. Charlotte expressed her feelings through increased clinginess with Catherine, rarely leaving her mother's side during private family time. Louis, sensing the emotional undercurrents without understanding them, became more demanding of attention and comfort. Catherine's response to the possibility of extended separation surprised even herself. Instead of despair, she felt a surge of determination to prove that she could handle whatever challenges duty demanded. She began planning additional charitable initiatives, expanding her public role in ways that would make meaningful use of the time William would be away. Her strength became a source of inspiration, not just to her family, but to people around the world who were facing their own separations and challenges. The decision about the extension ultimately came down to a late-night conference call involving William, Catherine, and senior palace officials. Catherine's voice was clear and steady as she encouraged William to accept the extension if it was truly necessary, telling him that she and the children would not only survive but thrive during his continued absence. Her strength gave William the courage to make the right decision for the greater good. William's announcement that he would accept the extension was met with mixed reactions from the public. While many admired his dedication to duty, others felt sympathy for the personal cost he and Catherine were paying. The royal couple released a joint statement explaining their decision, emphasizing their belief that service sometimes required sacrifice, and their determination to model commitment to duty, even when it was difficult. The news of the extension prompted an outpouring of support from unexpected quarters. Military families shared their own stories of separation and sacrifice. Diplomatic spouses wrote letters of encouragement to Catherine. Children from around the Commonwealth sent drawings and cards expressing their hope that Prince William would return home soon. The response reminded both William and Catherine that their personal sacrifice was part of a larger tradition of service. Catherine's first major solo international engagement was scheduled during the extension period, a test of her ability to represent the crown without William's support. The preparation for this trip became a welcome distraction from missing her husband, and her staff marveled at her attention to detail and determination to succeed. She was no longer just supporting William's work, she was creating her own legacy of service. The phone call in which William and Catherine discussed the solo international trip revealed how much their relationship had evolved during the separation. They spoke as equal partners, with Catherine seeking William's advice while also asserting her own vision for the engagement. Their mutual respect and support had deepened during their time apart, creating an even stronger foundation for their partnership. As the original departure date passed and the extension officially began, both William and Catherine marked the moment privately. Catherine lit a candle in their bedroom and said a prayer for William's continued safety and success. William, on the other side of the world, watched the sun rise and thought about Catherine waking up in their bed, probably reaching automatically for the space where he should have been lying beside her. The extension period would test their love and commitment in ways the original separation had not, but both approached it with the confidence that came from having already proven their strength. Their goodbye had stirred the nation, but their continued separation was demonstrating something even more powerful, that true love could endure any distance, and that duty shared between partners was not a burden, but a privilege. The hours following William's departure settled into a strange rhythm for Catherine. The palace staff moved around her with increased attentiveness, their faces showing the careful concern of people who understood that the princess would need extra support during this time. Every person who served the royal household had witnessed such departures before, and they knew how to provide comfort without intruding on private grief. Catherine threw herself into her official duties with a determination that impressed even her experienced staff. She reviewed correspondence with unusual focus, approved charitable patronages with careful consideration, and prepared for upcoming engagements with meticulous attention to detail. Work became her anchor, a way to channel the restless energy that threatened to overwhelm her if she allowed herself too much time to think. Meanwhile, thousands of miles away, William's aircraft continued its journey across continents. He sat in the comfortable cabin surrounded by advisors and security personnel, yet feeling more isolated than he had ever felt before. The briefing document spread before him demanded his attention, but his mind kept drifting to memories of the morning's goodbye, replaying every moment with painful clarity. The first photographs from the departure ceremony began appearing in newspapers and online media outlets within hours. The images captured the dignity and composure that both William and Catherine had maintained throughout the farewell. But photographers with trained eyes had also caught the subtle signs of emotion that neither could completely hide. The pictures would soon become symbols of duty triumphing over personal desires. Catherine's first public appearance since the departure was scheduled for the afternoon, a visit to a children's hospital that had been planned weeks earlier. Her staff watched nervously as she prepared, knowing that this would be the first test of her ability to maintain royal composure while dealing with personal emotion. The children and families at the hospital deserved her full attention, regardless of what she was experiencing privately. The princess arrived at the hospital to find crowds of well-wishers gathered outside, many holding flowers and handmade cards expressing support for her and William. The public's response to news of the separation had been overwhelmingly sympathetic, with people recognizing the sacrifice that duty sometimes demanded from the royal family. Catherine was touched by their kindness, even as it reminded her of the public nature of her private pain. Inside the hospital, Catherine moved through the wards with her characteristic warmth and genuine interest in every person she met. Children who had been ill for months brightened at her presence, their faces lighting up with the joy that royal visits often brought to difficult situations. Catherine found herself drawing strength from their resilience, their ability to find happiness despite facing challenges far greater than her temporary separation from William. William, now halfway through his journey, received his first update about Catherine's hospital visit through official channels. Reading the report about her successful engagement filled him with pride and love, even as it reminded him of all the moments they usually shared together. He had always admired her ability to connect with people, to bring comfort and joy wherever she went, and knowing she was continuing that work helped ease some of his guilt about leaving. The children at the hospital asked Catherine the questions that children always asked during royal visits. But today some of their innocent inquiries carried unexpected weight. A 7-year-old girl asked if the princess missed Prince William, and Catherine's answer, honest but appropriate, revealed both her pain and her strength. She explained that sometimes grown-ups had to do important work even when it meant being apart from people they loved. As evening approached, Catherine returned to Kensington Palace to find the familiar rhythm of family life waiting for her. The children's return from school brought the house alive with noise and energy, their presence filling the spaces that had felt empty during the day. George, Charlotte, and Louis seemed to sense their mother needed extra attention, staying closer to her than usual during dinner and bedtime routines. William's aircraft finally touched down at its destination as night fell across his new temporary home. The formal reception that awaited him was conducted with all appropriate dignity, but he moved through the ceremonies with part of his attention still focused on home. Time zones meant that Catherine and the children would be settling into their evening routine, just as his official duties were beginning. The first phone call between the separated couple came late that evening, their voices carrying across the thousands of miles that now separated them. They spoke carefully at first, both aware that such communications might not be entirely private, but gradually relaxed into the easy conversation of people who knew each other completely. Catherine told him about the hospital visit and the Children's Day, while William shared what he could about his arrival and initial impressions. Catherine's bedtime routine felt strange without William's presence. Their bedroom, usually a sanctuary where they could drop their public personas and simply be husband and wife, now felt too large and too quiet. She found herself reaching for his pillow, seeking comfort in the familiar scent that still lingered on the fabric. Sleep, when it finally came, was fitful and interrupted by dreams of the morning's goodbye. William faced his own challenges settling into unfamiliar surroundings. The guest quarters provided for him were luxurious and comfortable, but they lacked the personal touches that made Kensington Palace feel like home. He found himself missing not just Catherine's physical presence, but all the small details of their shared life, her habit of reading before sleep, the sound of her moving quietly around their room, the simple comfort of knowing she was near. The next morning brought fresh challenges for both of them. Catherine woke to an empty bed and had to steel herself for another day of maintaining royal composure while managing private sadness. Her schedule was full of engagements designed to keep her occupied, but each activity served as a reminder that she was facing these duties alone, instead of as part of the team she and William had become. William began his first full day of official duties in his temporary assignment, throwing himself into the work with the dedication that had been instilled in him since childhood. Yet even as he fulfilled his obligations with characteristic competence, part of his mind remained focused on home, calculating time differences and wondering what Catherine and the children were doing at each moment. The media attention surrounding the separation intensified as more details about the royal couple's goodbye became public. Newspapers and television programs analyzed every gesture and expression from the departure ceremony, creating narratives about royal duty and personal sacrifice that resonated with people around the world. The story of William and Catherine's farewell had touched something deep in the public consciousness. Catherine found herself reading some of the coverage, curious about how their private moment had been interpreted for public consumption. The articles were generally sympathetic and respectful, recognizing the difficulty of the situation while praising both royals for their dedication to duty. Yet seeing her most intimate emotions discussed in newspapers felt surreal and slightly invasive, a reminder of the price that came with public life. As the second day of separation drew to a close, both William and Catherine had begun to establish new routines that accommodated their temporary distance. They scheduled regular phone calls, coordinated their communications about the children, and found ways to maintain their emotional connection despite the physical separation. The goodbye that had stirred the nation was evolving into a demonstration of enduring love and commitment that would inspire people long after William's return. William stepped into the vehicle with the fluid motion of someone who had performed this action countless times. Yet today each movement felt weighted with significance. The leather seats that had cradled him during numerous official journeys now seemed foreign and uncomfortable, a barrier between him and the home he was leaving behind. Through the tinted windows he could still see Catherine standing in the courtyard, her figure framed by the ancient stones of Kensington Palace. The car door closed with a soft but final sound that seemed to echo in the morning air. Catherine heard it like a physical blow, the noise that severed the last tangible connection between them. She remained motionless in the courtyard, her training and royal composure holding her upright even as her heart felt like it was shattering. The palace staff nearby pretended not to notice the way her hands clenched at her sides. Inside the vehicle, William settled into his seat, but immediately turned to look back through the rear window. Catherine's figure grew smaller but remained perfectly clear in his vision. She stood with her characteristic grace, her chin lifted at the angle that had become familiar to millions of people around the world. But William saw what others might miss, the slight stiffness in her posture that spoke of tremendous effort to maintain control. The convoy began to move with practiced precision, each vehicle falling into its designated position in the security formation. The sound of tires on the palace gravel marked the beginning of William's journey away from everything that anchored him to happiness. He watched Catherine through the window until the palace walls blocked his view, his hand pressed against the glass in a gesture that felt both futile and necessary. Catherine remained in the courtyard long after the last vehicle had disappeared through the palace gates. The silence that followed the departure felt heavy and strange after the purposeful activity of the morning. Palace staff began to disperse quietly, returning to their duties while giving the princess space to process the moment privately. The courtyard, so recently filled with people and purpose, now felt vast and empty. The princess walked slowly back toward the palace entrance, her steps echoing off the stone walls in a way they hadn't when William was beside her. The sound seemed to emphasize her solitude, the reality that she would be walking these halls alone for an uncertain period of time. Yet her movement remained graceful and controlled, a testament to years of training in maintaining dignity under pressure. Meanwhile, William's convoy made its way through London's morning traffic, the security vehicles creating a bubble of protection around the royal passenger. Through the windows he could see ordinary people beginning their daily routines, unaware that a prince was passing among them, carrying the weight of impending separation. The normalcy of life outside the convoy felt surreal compared to the magnitude of what was happening inside it. Catherine reached her private sitting room and closed the door behind her with deliberate care. For the first time since waking, she was truly alone, free from the watching eyes of staff and the need to project royal composure. She moved to the window that overlooked the gardens, pressing her palms against the cool glass as she gazed out at the landscape she and William had walked together countless times. The sitting room felt different in William's absence, as if his departure had altered the very air inside it. The chairs where they had shared quiet conversations seemed to wait expectantly for his return. The books he had been reading lay exactly where he had left them, their pages marked with his place, creating the illusion that he might return at any moment to continue reading. William's phone buzzed with the first of what would be many security updates and briefings during his journey. The formal language of official communications felt harsh after the gentle intimacy of the morning's goodbye. He responded appropriately, his training in royal protocols taking over even as his mind remained focused on the image of Catherine standing alone in the courtyard. Back at the palace, Catherine's phone rang with the first call of what would be a carefully orchestrated day of activities designed to keep her occupied during William's absence. Her private secretary spoke in soothing tones about rearranged schedules and modified commitments, all carefully planned to help her navigate this difficult period. Catherine listened and responded appropriately, but part of her attention remained fixed on the empty chair where William usually sat during such calls. The children had been taken to school by their security detail, their own schedules maintained with the stability that royal children learned to depend upon. They had said their goodbyes to their father earlier, in the private family moments that preceded the formal departure. Now they would spend their day in the familiar routines of lessons and activities, while carrying the knowledge that Papa was farther away than usual. William's convoy reached the airport where the official aircraft waited on the tarmac, its engines already warming for departure. The sight of the plane made the journey feel suddenly real and immediate. This was no longer about leaving the palace. This was about leaving the country, putting thousands of miles between himself and the people who mattered most to him. Catherine stood at her sitting room window, watching the gardeners tend to the grounds that stretched beyond the palace walls. Their work continued with the same rhythm it had maintained for generations, unchanged by royal departures and arrivals. There was something comforting in this continuity, this reminder that life persisted through all manner of personal upheavals. The princess made her way to the children's playroom, seeking comfort in the space that held so much of their family's happiness. Toys sat arranged exactly as the children had left them, creating a landscape of childhood that seemed to pulse with recent laughter and activity. She touched a stuffed animal that Louis had been carrying that morning, the soft fabric still holding the warmth of small hands. William's aircraft taxied toward the runway, its path taking it past windows where he could see travelers and airport workers going about their business. The normalcy of their activities contrasted sharply with the significance of his departure. He thought about Catherine waking up tomorrow in their bed alone, about the children asking when Papa would call, about the countless small moments he would miss while duty carried him away. The engines reached full power, and the aircraft began its takeoff roll down the runway. William felt the familiar sensation of leaving the ground, of rising above the landscape that held everything precious to him. Through the small window, he watched England grow smaller beneath him, each mile of altitude adding to the distance between himself and home. Catherine felt the exact moment when the aircraft lifted off, though she had no way of knowing it consciously. Something shifted in her chest, a recognition that the goodbye was now complete and irreversible. The formal phase of departure was over. Now began the harder task of managing the days and weeks until his return. She straightened her shoulders and prepared to face the hours ahead with the grace expected of a princess, even as her heart remained with the man who was now somewhere above the clouds. The courtyard of Kensington Palace had been transformed into a stage for departure. Security personnel stood at attention while palace staff maintained their positions along the perimeter, creating a human corridor that would guide William to the waiting convoy. The morning air carried the scent of autumn leaves and the distant sounds of London traffic, a reminder that life continued its normal pace beyond the palace walls. Catherine emerged from the palace beside William, her composure carefully maintained despite the emotion visible in her eyes. The black dress she had chosen moved gracefully in the gentle breeze, and her hair was styled in the elegant manner that had become her signature. Yet those who knew her well could see the subtle signs of the struggle taking place beneath her royal bearing. The couple walked slowly across the courtyard, their pace measured and deliberate. Every step carried them closer to the moment of separation, yet neither seemed eager to rush toward it. William's hand rested lightly on Catherine's elbow, a gesture of support that spoke of their partnership even in this difficult moment. Their children were notably absent, having already said their private goodbyes upstairs, away from the formal ceremony of departure. Members of the royal household staff lined the pathway, their faces reflecting the respect and affection they held for both the prince and princess. These were people who had served the royal family for years, who had witnessed the couple's relationship grow from courtship through marriage to parenthood. They understood the weight of this moment, the sacrifice that public service sometimes demanded from those they served. The lead vehicle in the convoy sat with its door open, waiting like a patient beast ready to carry William away from everything he held dear. The sight of it seemed to make the departure real in a way that all the preparation and planning had not. This was no longer about schedules and protocols. It was about a husband leaving his wife, a father leaving his children, a man choosing duty over desire. Catherine's steps slowed as they approached the car, and William matched her pace without question. Neither spoke, but their synchronized movement revealed the deep understanding they had developed over years of marriage and partnership. They had learned to communicate without words, to provide comfort through presence, to find strength in their shared commitment to something larger than themselves. A senior aide approached with final documents, requiring William's attention, speaking in hushed tones that wouldn't disturb the intimacy of the moment. William signed where indicated, his signature as steady and sure as always, though Catherine could see the slight tension in his jaw that betrayed his inner conflict. The paperwork represented the official nature of his departure, the responsibilities that called him away from personal happiness. The security team leader gave a subtle nod, indicating that all preparations were complete and they were ready to depart. The gesture was almost invisible to untrained eyes, but William caught it immediately. His training in royal protocol had taught him to read such signals, to know when the moment for private emotion had passed and public duty must take precedence. Catherine reached up to adjust William's uniform one final time, her fingers smoothing an already perfect collar with the careful attention of a wife who wanted her husband to look his best. The gesture was so natural, so filled with quiet love, that even the experienced palace staff felt moved by its simple intimacy. It spoke of countless similar moments shared in privacy, of a relationship built on genuine affection despite its public nature. William caught Catherine's hands in his own, holding them for a moment against his chest where she could feel the steady beating of his heart. Neither spoke, but their eyes met with the intensity of two people trying to memorize each other's faces. The sound of the idling engines seemed to fade into the background as they focused entirely on each other, storing up this moment against the separation to come. The couple began moving toward the open car door, their steps now synchronized with an inevitability that neither could fight. Catherine's chin lifted slightly, a subtle but unmistakable sign that she was drawing on the inner strength that had carried her through years of royal life. William's posture straightened, the transformation from husband to prince becoming visible in the set of his shoulders and the firm line of his jaw. As they reached the vehicle, William paused and turned to face Catherine directly. For a moment, the watching staff and security personnel seemed to fade into the background, leaving just the two of them in their bubble of shared understanding. The morning light caught the tears that Catherine was fighting to hold back, making her eyes shimmer with unshed emotion. William lifted his hand to Catherine's cheek, his thumb brushing against her skin with the gentleness of someone who knew exactly how to comfort her. The gesture was so tender, so filled with unspoken love that it seemed to hang in the air like a promise. Catherine closed her eyes briefly, leaning into his touch as if trying to memorize the feeling of his hand against her face. The sound of a throat being cleared discreetly reminded them that time was running short. The security team was ready, the convoy was prepared, and the schedule that governed royal life was asserting its authority over personal moments. William's hand lingered on Catherine's cheek for one more second before he forced himself to step back. Catherine's smile was brave but fragile as she watched William prepare to enter the car. She had perfected this smile over years of royal engagements, learning to project calm and confidence even when her heart was breaking. Now it served her well as she prepared to watch the most important person in her life drive away from their shared sanctuary. William hesitated at the car door, his hand resting on the frame as he looked back at Catherine one more time. The sight of her standing there, beautiful and strong despite the pain he could see in her eyes, made his chest tighten with emotion. She represented everything he was leaving behind, everything that made the sacrifices of royal life worthwhile. The security team leader took a step forward, a gentle but firm reminder that the departure could not be delayed much longer. William nodded once, acknowledging the necessity while hating it. He had been trained from birth to put duty before personal desires, But that training had never made such moments easier to bear. Catherine lifted her hand in a small wave, the gesture somehow managing to be both regal and heartbreakingly personal. Her fingers moved with practiced grace, but William could see the slight tremor that betrayed her emotional state. She was being the princess that her position required while still being the wife that her heart demanded. The morning sun cast long shadows across the polished floors of Kensington Palace as Catherine, Princess of Wales, stood before her bedroom mirror. Her hands trembled slightly as she adjusted the simple black dress she had chosen for what would become one of the most difficult days of her life. The reflection staring back at her showed a woman who had grown from a commoner into royalty, but today she felt like neither. She felt like a wife about to say goodbye to her husband. William had been pacing the corridors since dawn. The sound of his footsteps echoed through the halls where they had shared so many private moments away from the public eye. Today was different from all the other times he had left for royal duties or official visits. This departure carried a weight that pressed down on both their shoulders like a heavy cloak they couldn't remove. The children had sensed something was different at breakfast. George, now old enough to understand that Papa's trips were sometimes longer than others, had been unusually quiet. Charlotte kept asking when Daddy would be back, her small voice carrying the confusion that children feel when the adult world intrudes on their safe bubble. Little Louis, still too young to fully grasp the situation, had crawled into William's lap during their morning routine, unknowingly making the impending farewell even more difficult. Catherine remembered the conversation they had shared the night before, sitting together in their private sitting room after the children had gone to bed. William had taken her hands in his blue eyes reflecting the same mixture of duty and reluctance that she felt in her own heart. They had talked about everything and nothing, both knowing that this moment had been approaching for weeks, yet neither fully prepared for its arrival. The palace staff moved around them with practiced discretion, their faces carefully neutral as they prepared for the departure. These were people who had witnessed royal farewells before, who understood the delicate balance between public duty and private emotion. They had seen the couple grow from newlyweds into partners who had weathered storms together, who had learned to carry the weight of the crown while protecting their family's privacy. Catherine walked down the grand staircase, her hand trailing along the banister that had become as familiar as breathing. Each step brought her closer to the moment she had been dreading. The entrance hall, usually a place of welcome for visiting dignitaries and family gatherings, now felt like a stage set for goodbye. Fresh flowers arranged in crystal vases seemed to mock the solemnity of the occasion with their cheerful colors. William was already waiting, dressed in his formal uniform, every button polished to perfection. The sight of him in his ceremonial attire always made her heart skip, but today it served as a reminder of the duties that were calling him away. His shoulders were set with the posture of a man who had been born to serve, yet his eyes betrayed the husband who would rather stay home with his family. The couple's private secretary approached with final documents and schedules, speaking in the hushed tones that palace staff use during sensitive moments. Security personnel moved efficiently in the background, conducting final checks and coordinating with the teams that would accompany William on his journey. The machinery of royal protocol was in motion, unstoppable once it began. Catherine and William found themselves alone for a precious few minutes in the entrance hall. Without the children present, without staff hovering nearby, they could drop the composed masks they wore so well in public. William reached for her hand, his thumb tracing the wedding ring that had become a symbol not just of their marriage, but of their partnership in bearing the responsibilities of the monarchy. They spoke in the quiet voices of people who had learned to find intimacy in stolen moments. William assured her once again that the communication channels would remain open, that despite the distance and the demands of his mission, she would never be truly alone. Catherine reminded him of the strength they had built together, the foundation that would hold steady no matter how far apart they might be. The sound of vehicles arriving in the courtyard signaled that time was running short. Through the tall windows, Catherine could see the official cars lined up with military precision, their engines running quietly in the morning air. Security teams moved with subtle efficiency, checking perimeters and coordinating final details. The outside world was preparing to witness a moment that felt intensely personal. Catherine straightened William's uniform collar one last time, a gesture so natural and intimate that it spoke of countless similar moments shared in private. Her fingers lingered on the fabric as if trying to memorize the texture, the warmth of him beneath the formal attire. William caught her hand and brought it to his lips, a kiss so gentle it seemed to hold all the words they couldn't say aloud. The heavy doors of Kensington Palace opened, and the morning light streamed in, carrying with it the sounds of the city beyond their private world. London was waking up to another day, unaware that within these walls 2 people who had given their lives to public service were sharing a moment of purely personal emotion. The contrast between their public roles and private feelings had never felt more stark. As they walked together toward the entrance, Catherine could feel the weight of history in every step. These halls had witnessed royal farewells for centuries, had seen kings and queens say goodbye to loved ones in service of duty. Yet this moment felt entirely unique, entirely theirs, despite being part of a tradition much larger than themselves. William paused at the threshold, turning back to look at the home they had created together. Behind these walls lived the laughter of their children, the quiet conversations of their marriage, the dreams they had built for their family's future. Leaving it behind, even temporarily, required a kind of courage that had nothing to do with the bravery demanded by his royal duties. The moment had arrived when private emotion would have to yield to public responsibility, when the husband would have to step aside for the prince, when the wife would have to become the princess who could stand strong in his absence. They both took deep breaths, preparing for the transformation that duty demanded, knowing that their love would remain constant even as their roles required them to appear composed and resolved.